Hello, everybody. Tracy Mrs. JDog Flanagan with you here today. I'm the co-founder and senior vice president at JDog Brands. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Tactical Treasures Podcast. Our podcast gives veterans, mil spouses, active military members, military family members, and patriotic military supporters a voice in the veteran space to speak about their service, how they're affecting their communities post-service, and they share with me a tactical treasure that has helped them in their journey in their military career, business, or life. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Amy Zender. Amy Zender is a military brat turned mil spouse. Her father was a colonel in the Army and the Ludwigsburg community commander in Germany. Amy and her family PC'd to Germany when she was 6 months old. For the next several years, by age 18, Amy had moved 11 times with 3 separate tours to what was still known as West Germany, and attended 9 different schools, including 3 middle schools and 2 high schools in 2 different countries. Amy loved Germany, having learned the language and making many German friends. Navigating the different cultures between the United States and Germany proved challenging, but prepared her for her role as a mil spouse. Amy met and married a Marine Corps fighter pilot who served 12 years active duty and a couple more as a reservist. Being a part of the military community again, Amy felt at home with her people and was thankful for smartphones and social media that connected and involved her in military brat groups. She is currently the vice president of the Stuttgart American Schools Alumni Association, which connects and supports the more than 3,200 alumni around the world who were once a part of the greater Stuttgart military community of schools. She also sits on the board of directors for American Overseas Schools Historical Society, which strives to collate and preserve memorabilia, records, and historical documents of overseas high schools. Hi, Amy. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited for our discussion today.
Thank you.
I'm excited.
Podcast.
Oh, it's going to be great. We're just going to have a conversation. And I just love your story, and I really love the military brat story. As you know, I had your colleague, Mark Fisher on, and dear friend on, and he's a military brat as well. And, you know, you don't often hear these stories in the military community of what our military brats experience and go through and how they serve as well, right along with their mother or their service member, whether it's a mother or father serving or both serving. And so I think it's really a very interesting piece. So military brat life. Wow, you moved a ton of times.
I did.
Many schools, different high schools, and high schools that had to be really tough, you know, navigating that world in itself, but establishing yourself, having identity, and then being ripped out and going someplace else where you don't know anybody. It's just a little synopsis of your military brat life. What was it like?
I mean, I'm also coming, first of all, thank you for having me. And I'm really excited to be here and share just a small part of the overall brat story that we all share. You know, the funny part is I'm an only child too. So when it came time to go to a new school and, you know, you show up with your little lunchbox at the cafeteria, you know, there's not really a lot of, you know, you don't have a sibling to sit with, you know, like an older sibling or somebody to kind of show around. But anyways, the military brat community is a very wide open community. And so it was really easy to just go sit next to somebody and kind of go, hi. And I think part of the beautiful thing about being a military brat is there is a sense of reinvention every time you go to a new place, a new school, a new community, a new post. You have the opportunity to kind of think to yourself, wow, I was a little shy at my last school, and maybe I can kick it up a notch and be a little bit more outgoing, or I wish I had joined drama club and I can do it this time around. I had, growing up, by the time I was 18, I had 3 separate tours to Germany. Once there, I was in German kindergarten through like their little schooling for early childhood. And then I was there again in middle school. And then I was there again for high school. 3 completely important parts of like development, your language development, your social development. And so it really imprinted on me. I like to pretend I wasn't actually born in Alabama, that I'm actually just from Germany. I
I
say
love
that
it.
I say that often, but we had 11 moves all together, different states, and different jobs my dad had, which really added to the overall experience. So it wasn't like he still did a military job 9 to 5 and was home in the evenings. There was countless times that he was gone for weeks at a time. He was pretty deeply involved in special operations, special forces, and other clandestine activities throughout his 30 years. And so some of that trickled into the home. We had a red phone. We had a special office that Dad would go to. We had no touch items in the house for communication purposes.
Wow.
The 3 o'clock phone calls for training. And my fellow military brats will know this, but the phone rings in the middle of the night. A military member gets up, gets full battle gear on, and heads off, and you don't see him for a couple weeks. And it could be any number of training exercises. And only actually right before my dad passed away did he share that one of those training exercises was, in fact, a very real event. A fire was put out at a very, important time. So, you kind of look back on that and you wonder, how many of the things he couldn't share. So in addition to new schools and making new friends, losing friends, trying out for cheerleading again, because you have to do it again, even though you made the team, or trying to get on the honor society, or, trying out for football, whatever the case may be. There's the home component too of, where's mom, where's dad, that kind of thing. So we had, different levels of stress. I think I wrote you that my last move was my hardest move, because it was right in the middle of high school. And I really have nothing to complain about. When I listened to my friends who've been to 3 different high schools, their final one they were only at for their senior year. So, I at least had 2 years to find some sense of settlement and establishment before I graduated.
But now, did you graduate from Stuttgart in Germany?
I did in 1991
Okay.
with Mark Fisher and a few other
Mm-hmm.
several others. We graduated June 1991 from Stuttgart American High School. It was the next to the last class to graduate. The school shut down in 1992.
Okay. Okay. And I remember that was difficult for you because you were in America and you were very well established
Mm-hmm.
in your high school at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and you had to leave all that behind. And
That
um,
I
that
begged Frau
that's
MacGyver
hard.
to let me live with her. And I said, oh, please let me come and stay. You could teach me all the German. And it was kind of silly on my part, but it was also like, obviously I needed to move to Germany with my parents, but it
Right.
was kind of I was a little brat that summer, in the real brat sense. So
Oh gosh. Well, it's tough. It's tough that everything that you deal with, in very formidable age group of,
absolutely.
those teen years are difficult to navigate at best. But having, moves on top of that and being in a foreign country, and I can't imagine. Wow.
And
Hats off to you. It's
all of
amazing.
that is so true. But what also we discovered being over there was this just indelible freedom. It was lush and rich, and we were independent, and we had to make, real life decisions as children, essentially. Our parents, now we're also Generation X. So we're
Right.
sort of the feral generation, kind of left alone anyway. But our our experience was that we boarded buses and public transportation and would go away for the weekend to visit friends. We had students come as far away as an hour and 40-minute drive every morning. So during
Wow.
sports seasons, you'd have, football players and basketball players, cheerleaders too. They would ride the bus in on Monday morning, and they would stay with friends through the week and then ride their bus home on Friday, so they could do the games and practices. We had late buses, so the ones who did go back, they weren't getting home till 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night after practice. So it was like we had to really learn about time management. I personally walked to school. I lived on post, but several of my friends, they would do their last minute studying, their homework, their papers on the bus, and they had to make critical use of that time, or sleep,
Sure.
or rest, or eat,
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow. Crazy. So your dad, I know he was very special to you. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with him?
Sure. I think he was, like so many military brats, their military parent is a lot of their hero. My dad was also an only child, born out of East Texas, and all he ever wanted to do was be a soldier. And I have this great little picture of him as a little boy, and he's got this little play BB gun rifle. He's standing at attention, and from the earliest time, that's all he wanted to do. And he pursued all the Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts, Order of the Arrow, all the way through. And, he did everything, went to college. He had an appointment to West Point, lost it for a football injury. So I think that kind of crushed him. And so he went to college and was bored and started a skydiving group, and ultimately became student body president. I mean, he was just a 6'3" wow factor. Everybody who met him was charmed by him. He was delicate and intelligent and very disarming. And yet he just had this just strong desire to serve his country. And so he was recruited in college by some special secret government organization and the Army to come and do some work. And this was during Vietnam. So he said, I will if I can do two things. I'd like to be an officer, and I would like to fly airplanes. And they said, done and done. So he
Wow.
leaves for training, called his dad on the way home and said, I just want you to know I've enlisted in the Army today.
Oh my gosh.
My mama and papa were all aghast, and so off he went to training, and he did this very special mission in Vietnam and came back, and they sent him through OCS and flight school, and he went back to Vietnam with a second tour. So, and then there was a third tour, and special operations was his sort of kind of made his blood rush a little bit. And his cover assignments were always through the Corps of Engineers. So he was Corps of Engineer the whole time as well. But wow. I came along, and he had just had his last tour in Vietnam when I came along, living in Alabama. He was at Fort Rucker. He just was a perfect playmate. And so Dad and I always had adventures. He would teach me self-defense. He would make everything out to be almost like a Scooby-Doo. This is the case of the missing shoe. We'd be walking and there'd be a shoe. This case of the missing shoe. Or, we found under $1 in coins one time, and he, buried treasure. And we had this whole thing, and he would just devise these my whole life up until I graduated high school. And he always leaned into me as an adult. I mean, he had my mom and all of that, but I think he knew, as a young woman, that I might have my own challenges. And he didn't want to see me face some of those challenges. So he always included me with adult ideas and challenged me. Our big favorite thing to do in Germany was drive our bikes through the cornfields and end up suddenly we'd hit an ice cream place. My dad loved ice cream, so we would, go and have ice cream together. But when we came back to the States and he gave up command of the brigade, he was working at the White House. And one of the things that he shared with me, there was this really amazing poster on his home office. And it was a man free falling, all black. There's a landmine on his helmet. He's carrying like some kind of an M16 rifle. I'm probably getting that wrong, but he's carrying a rifle. And he just kind of said, "Hey, you see this behind me?" And yeah, that's pretty cool, Dad. He's like, "Well, that's me." And I think it was like in this moment, he really could see I was a young adult and he could really open up a little bit more about his career. And I felt so special to be included in those stories. And then, he gave me a very, very hard time in a loving way about marrying into the Marine Corps. And it was
that was going to be my next question. Yeah, so I'm sure he was like, couldn't it be an Army guy, right?
I mean, the big party line was, and he said this every time we were in mixed company, he would say, "Well, my worst day ever was when my daughter comes to me and says, 'Dad, I have fallen in love with a Marine.'" Oh, where have I gone wrong? And
oh my gosh.
The joke is, but I said to him, truly, I said, "Dad, it could be so much worse. I don't think it could get worse in the Marine Corps." I said, "I could have fallen in love with a civilian." And
that's great.
And he kind of thought about it and said, "That's a good point. I concede." But that didn't stop the little friendly rivalry, and it didn't help.
That's funny.
I met my husband. He was a second lieutenant, and my dad was very active duty still, 06 at the White House.
Oh my gosh.
A little intimidating.
I'm sure. But, as a Marine, he said, "I got this. I'm taking it on."
Right. And
That's
he did.
great.
He was served for about 4 or 5 years. It was,
right.
Took him a long time to call him by his first name.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So how did you meet your husband?
We met on a blind date. I love the story. We truly met on a blind date. There was, in Virginia, everybody commutes. You go to these things called slug lines and you wait for carpool. And my dad did them on occasion. He drove or he participated as a passenger. And he met people who worked in DC and government, made friends, and one had a son. He was in the Army previously, transitioned to the Marine Corps. And this gentleman and I were friends. And he's like, I might have somebody I can introduce you to. And I said, "Oh." And, I was barely 20 when this happened. I was very young. I just had my 20th birthday. And this gentleman says, "Nope, he's slated to be a pilot, so he might be a little cocky." And I was like, "Oh, I don't want to meet him." He's like, but I think you would really like this guy." And I said, "Fine, bring him by on Friday night." So they were headed into Washington, D.C. from Quantico, Virginia. They were in what they call TBS, the basic school. It's a 6-month school. All Marine officers have to go through it, whether you're going into being a JAG or infantry or take a pilot slot. You go through 6 months. It's how to be a Marine school, basically. And they were headed up into Washington, D.C. for the night, kind of check out the city at night. It's beautiful. And so they stopped by my house, and I was very smitten right away. He was quiet, and I'm not. And he was a little more reserved, and I also am not. But he was just dreamy, and he was beautiful, and he had good language skills, which are really impressive to me. And they left, they came back, and there's a little more to the story. That's, if there ever is a book, this will go in the book for sure. But they came back through, and my parents happened to be home, and I had already told my parents, I love this man already. So we had a meal together the next day, my parents and I. And 2 months later, he ships off to flight school in Florida. And all I could think about was, all the women down there are so beautiful in their bathing suits and their tans and long hair. There's no way I stand a chance. So we dated only in person for 2 months. 2 months later, I went down for the Marine Corps ball. We'd known each other for 4 months at this point, and he proposed.
Oh, wow.
And he
I
got
love it.
from my dad on it while my dad was deer hunting in Texas. So they were a couple states away. And my dad just thought, man, I just didn't know if that was a good choice on his part or a bad choice. But either way, I had to commend the bravery. So 4 months of dating, we were engaged and then married 13 months later.
Oh, wow. And now it's 30 years, right?
This December 17th, it will be 30 years.
Wow,
30 years.
that's
And
amazing.
we had all of our own moves as well.
I love it. I love it. That's
Hello,
awesome.
viewers and listeners. Are you a military veteran or military family member and looking to own your own business? If so, go to JDog.com and check out our 2 veteran-focused franchises, JDog Junk Removal and Hauling and JDog Carpet Cleaning and Floor Care. Our franchisees nationwide are always looking to hire fellow veterans and patriots. JDog is the world's largest military franchise system with hundreds of locations nationwide. We are nearly 90% veteran-owned with the goal of reducing the veteran unemployment rate to under 1%. Check us out. Go to jdog.com to learn more. Now, back to the podcast.
Knowing all you did as a military brat, what was the transition like to the mil spouse community? I'm sure, like, you sort of had some tricks of the trade already, right?
So that's a really powerful question, because we have thought about this a lot. And actually, my husband would say it really mattered that she already knew my lifestyle. She already knew kind of what the game was. We were dating, and I happened to point out, we were looking at some museum. My husband loves museums, and we were looking at a tank, and I was like, oh, is that a Bradley? And he's like, wow, you kind of know a little bit about this stuff, and I was raised around it. I went to flight shows. I went to, big military demonstrations and BDUs or camis, whatever they're named now, but the uniforms, the combat boots, the smell of boot polish. I mean, there isn't a military brat out there who doesn't have a photo in their parents' boots and, things like that. And so I knew when I met him what I would be in for in terms of being away from home and missed holidays and time apart. That I was completely familiar with. And Tony, my husband, he had to go before his commanding officer and basically request time off for the wedding. And this commanding officer, there were 3 gentlemen out there asking permission for, I need to get married and I need this time off. And the only guaranteed time was Christmas. And the young man in front of him said, I want to get married and this thing. And the CO was like, is she ready for this? Have you guys discussed it? And this young man said, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming so. And the conversation wasn't pleasant, is what I remember hearing. And Tony gets up before the CO, says all the same things, and says, her dad's an 06, colonel in the Army working at the White House. She gets it. We're ready. So, and he was like, just signed his leave paperwork and said, granted. So it definitely mattered. It was a very different world between the Army and the Marine Corps. There is so much more pomp and circumstance, and I mean that in a really positive way. With the Marine Corps, there's so much more to their history. I mean, the Marine Corps was born out of a bar, for crying out loud. They love to brag about that.
I know.
Nothing beats the Marine Corps ball. The ritual within it is so beautiful and raw, and it's poetic, and they bring in the oldest with the youngest, and there's just so much history that the Marine Corps brings to the table. And so I was able to get, very much a helmet fire and all of that. But there is quite a bit of a difference between the ground community, and I use that to describe, probably poorly, infantry, Corps of Engineers, the ground stuff versus aviation. Aviation is a very different life. So there was the learning curve there as well, just more in how their daily operations work. That was, and I just rolled with it. I'm pretty flexible. Going into the MilSpouse thing, I was around a lot of women, mostly women. There were the occasional husband, but this was still a long time ago. So really, we didn't see a lot of that until my husband became a flight instructor. But a lot of the women I met, also brand new spouses, fiancés, really had no connection to the military at all. They had met their husband or boyfriend, and that was their first introduction. And so in some ways I was able to offer support in ways that, and honestly soothe some feelings. I think there were a lot of hurt feelings when people realized their anniversary is not going to be celebrated on the night of their anniversary. It just doesn't work out that way. And when you attach yourself to something very tangential and physical, like a date, then I think you're going to set yourself up for disappointment. So we kind of celebrate the relationship when we are together and life is calm. So we have a December anniversary, but sometimes we celebrate it in October or November when we know we're available for one another. And that is more meaningful and I think those are the lessons I was able to bring to other new spouses who hadn't had the experiences that I had. Also communication. And I started seeing this more towards the end of my husband's career, where the introduction of smartphones had started. This was still very, people still had phone plans and we had to pay a lot of money for texting and things. But there was a real need all of a sudden for everybody to hear from everybody all the time. To this day, my husband will go on a 4-day trip and we may go 2 whole days and not have any communication. And that doesn't mean anything other than he's busy. He's taking that time that he has on deck to do something that he needs to take care of or get rest or eat. And I'm okay with that. So there's an inner strength I think you have to bring. And I started to see less and less of that in some of the newer wives. And so just being able to speak to that to them, like, don't take it personally.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So you do a lot of work with the military brat groups.
Yes.
Why are they so important?
Well, I'll be honest. I live here in the Pacific Northwest. I am an only child, and I will say that a lot. The Pacific Northwest is a very unique place. It's gorgeous up here, but I really struggled to find a place to fit in. We moved here right after Tony left the Marine Corps. So all of a sudden in 2004, my whole military identity just came to a screeching halt. I'm always a brat, but I wasn't an active military spouse. I didn't have any big balls to plan and coffees to host and women to call and check up on anymore. And I found that I was lonely for sure. And then the advent of Facebook and social media, which I poo-pooed initially. I thought this is just for young people. But as it became more popular and it was much more commercialized, I did get involved and I found people and I said, we were in English class together. And then we started talking about our former English teacher. And then more people came out of the woodworks. And then Facebook advanced and created groups. And suddenly somebody posts a picture. And I'm like, oh, I know this person and I know that person. And this is our trip to England. So little by little, this part of my past that I somehow had put to rest, I closed the chapter on. I thought, I get to reimagine this in today times and reconnected with absolutely my dearest friends and made new friends I'm just as close with. And so then I thought, it feels like home. It feels like home. I have chosen them as my family. And I'm not sure where the word originated. I know Mark said it, but it is like a true fellowship in that
Right.
we congregate, whether online or in a group text, or hey, one of our teachers is coming to Dallas. Let's all meet and hang out for a weekend. And, perks of being married to a pilot is I can just pop down and meet people I've never met before. But when we meet, we have an incredible amount of shared history. I mean, different names and different places, but our experience growing up as Gen X military brats it's unifying, absolutely
Sure.
genetically unifying. I mean, I know it's a little overdone, but so for me, then I thought, well, how can I give back? I was a stay-at-home mom. My children were growing and starting college soon enough. And I thought I can surely do something here. And it was a lot of fun. So I ran for vice president of just my high school's alumni association, and I won. I brought out my old giant red and white pom-poms and did my video saying I'm announcing I'm running for VP. And with the help of our president, we started something called Brat Chat, where I would get on and just interview people about their brat experience in Germany. It's a different thing when you graduate from Germany in 1971. Vietnam was happening. So many left, went off and fought and passed away. They were killed, wounded. The early 80s had much more threat even than we had. And I was there 89 to 91. So we were there when Germany reunified in 1989, and the wall was crumbling. So I just sort of dove in. And at that point, we hadn't yet started a scholarship for graduating seniors. Like I said, our high school doesn't exist anymore. It's been taken over by the German community. There is a new high school, same name ish, and they picked the colors of our biggest rival in Stuttgart. So we've had some discussions. But anyways, so we decided to assist with a scholarship. So we started a scholarship as well that we could support. And, it kind of highlighted there's an overall brat group of the American Overseas Historical Society. And they have a whole repository and a museum and rotating exhibitions of yearbooks and photos and awards and mascots and pom-poms and trophies. I mean, what do you do with an entire American high school that's been around since post-World War II, from the 50s? Where do you put it all? I mean, it's a beautiful set of memorabilia. So it's housed in Wichita, Kansas, with a wonderful board of directors who tirelessly work to keep things updated and corrected and this sort of thing, and helping people reconnect with their high school transcripts even, or yearbooks. And then,
Wow.
Taking that a step further, brats don't just have their brat, for us at Stuttgart, we're all Army brats, but we're also what they call third culture kids. And that's your diplo brats. Your mom or dad is an ambassador or doing some sort of diplomacy. Or in like Mark's case, their parent was a teacher for the Dodds school system. So you have children in this third culture, not definable by military. And so, well, where do they all congregate to meet? Not everybody wants to get together only every 3 years. Why not connect with the Air Force brat living in Seattle and the Navy brats who live over in Spokane, and, the Coast Guard brats in Portland? So these regional brat groups were born out of a wonderful human being named Chris Curios, who works at AOSH with me, and he has for 15 years. And he started these regional brat groups, and his is the most popular out of Colorado. And they get together and everybody wears their Letterman jackets. And you see the Osterholz and Nuremberg and Berlin and Stuttgart. And it's just, and we're all, 50 and older. And it's there. Oh, I just said my age. Oh, anyways. but I'm like, it brings everybody together. And so that's mixing Navy and Army and Air Force, but also students who didn't go to European schools. They're former students who maybe went to schools in Japan or Guam. And so the regional brat groups were born. And so we recently started one right around the time, a couple years ago, right around the time my dad passed away. So it's been a little inactive, but it's there and it's, revving up. But I am the leader of the Pacific Northwest brat group. So in there, 300 wonderful people, Air Force and Army and Navy brats from all over. And they're here now. And yet I know with every single one of them, I know their history. I know their story from a surface place, but we'll be able to have a conversation, So
that's great.
That's the beautiful thing. And in that, I found a sense of purpose, a lack of, loneliness. I'm a brand new empty nester as of this year as well. So it's allowed me to just get to know people in the traditional military way. Right. Hi, I'm Amy. What's your story? Where are you from? And why are you here now? So I think that has been such a gift, honestly, is being able to give back, because the brat community has fed me in such a significant way. I mean, especially since my dad passed away, and so many people, there was such an outpouring because of his position, but also just having a wide network. They just showed up for me. There's just no gratitude that will ever be big enough, and the words don't yet exist to say thank you, so I can be in service to my community. So that's why I've chosen to just dive in and do what I can.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, now we come to your tactical treasure.
Yes.
I can't wait to hear what you're going to share with us today.
So I really thought about this a lot, and I kind of agonized, and I lost a little sleep over it, because no, in a good way. Trust me, in a good way. It's emotional, and I mean that in that romantic way. If I had to impart anything onto anybody, I will share a quote that I shared at my dad's funeral. And so my brat friends will know this, but I love this quote because it is absolutely a perfect summation of our life. And I like to say, Margaret Atwood, the author, she said that in the end, all we become is stories. And so my tactical treasure is the storytelling. Continue to always share the stories, because everybody becomes a character in a story. We get to encourage the storytelling, and we get to pass down the memories, the facts, the beauty and the tragedy and the drama and the damage and the poetry of the way we were raised. And all of that is through the stories that we tell. And if it weren't for the stories that we can tell, there wouldn't be that, oh my gosh, I have a wonderful family member I get to choose in the form of a military brat. So it's storytelling. It will always be storytelling.
Love it. And that's why you need to write this book. Look at all the time you have on your hands now. You're an empty nester.
I do get asked a lot to write, and I really go back and forth. Do I want to share my father's story? Do I have in me what it would take to dive into his story? And I do lean towards that, but I also love writing love letters to life, love letters to people, love letters to experiences. I think my military brat friends would agree. So I might just compile it all into something. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I feel it that the words have to come out. So I would say stay tuned.
I am going to stay tuned. And you know what? I know you're saying you're not sure, are you going to tell your dad's story, but I think it's also your story too. You have a story, because of your dad's service. Your story is just as unique. So I
Thank you.
don't doubt that you don't have a story to tell, because I believe you do, and I believe that your story will inspire other military brats in today's world, to understand what this life is like, and to have a better understanding of what the military brat life is going to be like, or even if they're experiencing now, you could help them along the way. Anyway, I will
I
stay tuned.
appreciate your words of encouragement. Thank you for saying that. That was very
Oh,
beautiful.
well, I could just tell you have an eloquence to the way you speak and the way you are telling your story, and I just think it would be amazing. So I am definitely going to stay tuned. I
Thank
want
you.
to get the book. I want to buy the book. Okay. So lastly, any advice for your military brats struggling, or mil spouses struggling in life or with transition? And when I say military brats, I mean today's military brats, or that their parents now are serving, or military brats who their father or mother have been serving throughout Iraq and Afghanistan, and now maybe service is over, and they're struggling with that identity and identifying themselves.
Again, a profound question, and I honestly, this has crossed my mind a lot, and I'll tell you why. Also on Facebook, I'm involved in a few pilot wife groups, which is what I am now. I mean, I'm Amy, but my husband happens to be a pilot. So these are pilot spouse groups, and it's interesting to kind of keep my pulse on the aviation industry. But what I notice in the younger spouses of all airlines, all locations, several countries, the younger they are, the more communication they need. So, growing up at the military brat generation, we had the beauty of reconnection. We got to join Facebook and find people. The military brats of today are coming out already connected with social media. So when they go off to Colombia, or they join the military, or they go home and work in their grandparents' hardware store, they're going to still see each other through social media, and they can text and have all of that. And so they're not going to have that initial loneliness and sort of ripped outness that our generation had.
Mm-hmm.
But I would still recommend to them and to military spouses right now is communication, and not in the sense of demanding the communication in terms of frequency. It's outputting the communication, reaching out and saying, I need help. I need a community. I need someone to help me with my grocery shopping, or I need someone to maybe introduce me to somebody while I'm in school in New York. And I think, being able to feel safe and comfortable to ask the questions, they need to do so, because I think social media and our smartphones have kind of taken away the face-to-face courage. It
Sure.
says, I'm Amy, it's nice to meet you. We can just do that all here. But I still think that we need to encourage the mil spouses of today to stay in touch with the community they have, but also not be afraid to ask for help. And then also the mil brats of today, while they don't have the struggles that we had, they still have their own struggles. We're just now maybe on the outside of an active wartime situation, conflict. That doesn't take away that constant fear. So maintaining the ability to ask for help, interaction, send me a meme. I mean, when things were rough with my dad and he was home on hospice, my girls were like, what do you need? I said, send me jokes, send me memes, send me funny videos. And that's what they did, just all day. That's what they did. And that was hard for me to ask for. And I would encourage anybody connected right now, especially the younger people, it's okay to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of connectedness. And it'll be the greatest gift they can give themselves.
Well said. Yeah, I agree. Well, this has been amazing. I have enjoyed our discussion. Thank you so much for being so open to share your life and a little bit about your dad's life. It's been just amazing. So where can people find and connect with you if they want to, or where can they find out more information on getting involved with military brat groups?
So for our personal alumni group, I'm sure if you just Google the Stuttgart High School, you're going to trickle down into us. We're kind of a privately owned organization. There are a lot of different brat groups online on Facebook. We do happen to have a personal website for our high school. It's I'm sure you might could post it or whichever, but it's SASAA sasbrats.org is to our high school in Stuttgart. So you kind of have to be an alumni of Stuttgart High School. But there's also AOSH, AOSHS.org as well. And that is a nonprofit. And that's a way to tap into maybe places you've attended, and just to learn more. There's a link there to a fantastic documentary, Brats Without Borders, that really, it's narrated by Chris Christopherson, but it absolutely dives deep into the social impact, the psychological, emotional impact the military upbringing has on a child. And it's just rich with information and artwork, and some of the museum curations are there as well. I can be found on Facebook as well. Eventually, I'll probably title a book and get the domain name for that. But I'm very reachable at Amy at lovelettersonsunday.com.
Okay, Amy at lovelettersonsunday.com.
That was it. That was an Easter egg.
I love it. That's great. Amy, thank you so much again for coming on. This has been so absolutely amazing.
You've been a wonderful host. This really helped me feel so good, my first podcast, and I didn't fall apart.
That was awesome. It was rich with stories and information, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Tracy,
and
thank you so
much. You're welcome. And take care. And I'm going to keep my eye out for the book.
Okay.
Hello, viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Tactical Treasures Podcast. We've just finished an amazing conversation with Amy Zender, who is a military brat turned milspouse. And she spent several years going back and forth between the United States and Germany in many different schools. And she has leadership roles and is a huge advocate of military brat groups. To highlight a few, the Stuttgart American Schools Alumni Association, the group strives to connect and support more than 3,200 alumni around the world who were once a part of the greater Stuttgart military community of schools. Stuttgart, Germany, and its many sub-communities is where a lot lived and played. They have an active Facebook group, which is an evolving repository of memories, memes, and memorials. To learn more, go to sasbrats.org. American Overseas Schools Historical Society is a prestigious nonprofit organization housed in Wichita, Kansas, which strives to collate, and preserve memorabilia, records, and historical documents of overseas high schools. These are preserved and shared on a rotating exhibition. The goal is to promote knowledge of the unique experiences shared by being part of a Department of Defense school, either as a student or faculty. There is a scholarship committee which provides additional educational opportunities for students and attendants of the smallest DoD schools around the world. Check out more information at aoshs.org. And finally, Brats Without Borders. Started 15 years ago, this 501c3 has been a steadfast voice for the multitude of military and third culture brats, celebrating a unique and nearly invisible subculture. A documentary by the same name and narrated by Chris Christopherson showcases the profound impact of a military/TCK upbringing on a child, psychologically and socially. It is truly remarkable what brats experience and shoulder, but also enjoy and absorb. This organization has taken strides to share and inform on behalf of military brats and TCK worldwide. The enlightening and deeply educational documentary has pioneered the way of preserving and celebrating the military and third culture childhoods. You can learn more by going to bratswithoutborders.org. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget you can find Tactical Treasures podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms, as well as Vet TV, American Grit, and our dedicated YouTube channel. We are now airing on Reach Across America Radio on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern and Saturdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can also find Reach Across America Radio on the iHeartRadio app, the Odyssey app, and the TuneIn app. We are also proud to share that our JDog Foundation is a Reach Across America sponsorship group. For each 17 veterans wreath you sponsor, $5 goes directly back to the JDog Foundation, whose mission is to prevent veteran suicide and heal veterans' mental health and PTSD. You can donate right now at reachacrossamerica.org/JDog. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you soon on another podcast. Bye-bye now.